I used to be mortal enemies with a big business tycoon. But after a drunken night, we slept and made up. When I woke up though, I chickened out and ran away pregnant. 2 years later, he cornered me at the airport with our kid in tow. "Is this mine?" he asked. I lowered my head, feeling guilty. "It's the dog's." When he seemed sure he was the father, another guy put his arm around me. "I'm Daisy's husband, the name's Jason." I grabbed Leo by his tie and pulled him to bed. Big business tycoon or not, he's just a dude in a suit and tie trying hard to look sharp. After a moment of silence, he muttered, "Business requires negotiation." "Shut up." I lashed out, riding a wave of anger fueled by booze. I straddled him and threatened, "Give me back that business deal, or..." I paused dramatically, "Or I'll sleep with you." His eyes were unreadable and he stayed quiet for a while before calmly stating, "I won't." Fueled by drunken courage, I ended up taking advantage of him. But Leo was physically way tougher than my words. "Calm down." His deep voice brushed over me as he kissed from my brow to my earlobe. His kisses trailed down, burning with heat and alcohol, consuming every bit of oxygen. I clung to his shoulders, losing myself. By dawn, I woke from his arms. His rough hand was still on my waist, a reminder it wasn't all a dream. Damn it. For years, Leo and I had been arch-enemies since our fathers, business rivals, fought tooth and nail. We carried on that legacy, always competing with one another. He beat me in physical tests, I excelled over him in school. He'd rough up anyone who got romantic with me, so I'd ruin any of his budding romances. We've been single ever since. I thought we'd be rivals forever, and yet I actually slept with him. I checked under the covers, once, twice, 3 times, and finally hid my reddened face beneath them. Leo slept deeply, arm around my waist, another hand lazily resting over his forehead. Around his wrist was a string of beads he never took off, supposedly a gift from a girl he treasured. No one knew who Leo's first love was. I think he never revealed it because he feared I'd mess it up. When drunk, he'd describe her as serene and beautiful, everything I'm not. Besides, if our fathers found out about Leo and me, they'd probably cause an uproar. I sighed, starting to leave quietly. But last night's chaos became clear when I began dressing. My pants were under Leo's leg, my bra was over his head. Ashamed memories of last night flashed in my mind, and I bolted from the room in haste. Covered in romantic evidence, I went home, showered, and changed into a turtleneck. Then I told my dad I wanted to study overseas. He didn't even lift his head. "Sure, go to the best school, come back and outsmart that rascal Leo." But last night, it was Leo who nearly outsmarted me. My fingers brushed over neck bruises, evidence of last night's passion. "When are you leaving?" my dad abruptly asked, yanking me from my thoughts. "Today," I replied, biting my lip. Time flew. 2 years overseas, after that drunken encounter with Leo, the cool, aloof gentleman everyone talked about, I fled, blocking all contact. But every once in a while, I'd dream of that night. That reserved man drawing me gently into an intoxicating world. 2 years later, I hurried back when my dad fell ill. I also brought along my 1-year-old daughter. At the airport, scanning the crowd for our driver, I froze upon seeing a familiar face. Leo? My heart jumped as I spun around to flee, but it was pointless. He quickly caught up, running from what? His gaze was stormy as he leaned down, eyeing the child in my arms. Mine? I lowered my face, fiddling nervously with the baby's dress. Dogs. Dogs? He chuckled incredulously. "Daisy, you've really got some nerve. First, you forced yourself on me, then took my daughter." Guiltily, I'd admit it's true I did intentionally annoy Leo by feeding his dog lots of treats until it liked me more than him. The day I left his home in panic, his dog followed me, refusing to return. I boarded a private flight with both dog and child. "The dog?" he asked. "Abroad, with a strong husband and 7 pups, I replied. Leo ground his teeth, quite the family. I didn't want to face Leo any longer. I spoke softly, my dad's sick. I need to get to the hospital. Sure. Leo glanced at me, first hospital, I'll drive you. Nodding, he knelt to my daughter, Nora, and asked gently, would you like some candy? Nora, knowing only a few words, laughed brightly, reaching for his wrist where his beloved string of beads was. In an instant, they snapped, scattering everywhere. Leo stared at the beads, his face unreadable. Inside, I panicked. Oh no. Everyone knew how long he wore that bracelet. Leo stretched his hand towards Nora. I moved to stop him. She's just a kid, I'll reimburse you. I didn't finish. Leo bent over to pick up his daughter, blew on her hand. The bracelet had scattered, it was broken. The baby's strong, the baby's sweet. Is this still the once untouchable gentleman Leo? As I was lost in thought, someone walked up behind me and lightly tapped my shoulder, asking with a smile if the luggage was picked up. Wife, is this your friend? Leo was startled. He glanced over at my side, eyes cold, and you are? The other guy smiled, extending a hand to Leo. I'm Daisy's husband, last name's Jason. Leo gave me a sideways glance, biting back a sneer. No wonder I just heard her say the kid was a dog. The guy next to me laughed, well, technically. Not wrong. Leo looked down at Nora, then at the Jason beside me, his expression soured. Quite the resemblance. Saying that, Leo handed his daughter back to me and bent down to pick up the broken bracelet from the floor. I hurried to help him, but Jason held me back. I'll do it, you're holding the kid. Leo paused in picking up the bracelet. No need. The guy seemed to be on fast forward. Within seconds, the bracelet was picked up. Carefully brushing off the dust, he put it back in his pocket. The way he did it made my heart ache a bit. How much must he like someone to treat a little trinket from her as a treasure for so many years? I couldn't help it, blurted out, how are things with Vivian? Vivian. The only daughter of the Whites, quite a few noble young men's first crush. For the past 2 years, the two families have grown close, and rumors about the two have been flying. Leo once publicly stated his criteria for a partner, seemingly tailored to Vivian. Some even say that recently, the family elders are discussing their marriage. Leo fiddled with 2 beads from the bracelet, eyes sweeping over Jason before settling on me. He raised an eyebrow, so interested in my new life. Aren't you afraid your husband will get jealous? I hesitated. Was racking my brain for a rebuttal when Jason put an arm around my shoulder, laughing softly. My wife likes gossip, forgive her. Leo didn't respond, just gave me a look. I'm meeting Vivian for lunch, won't see you out. Turn right, there's a taxi area. I nodded, trying to hide my sour mood. Still, Vivian, so corny. Just got my feelings sorted and prepared to head out to catch a cab when suddenly I got a call. It was a driver arranged by my dad, on his way. I sighed in relief. Always so reliable, Dad. Hey sis, Jason, holding Nora with one hand, turned to me, aren't you ready to tell him the truth? I shook my head. Ran off with the kid back then, and now seeing Leo stable with Vivian, I feel less inclined to speak up. Jason's my biological brother. It's just that when he was a year old, our parents divorced. Jason then took Mom's last name, moved abroad, rarely came back. Dad kept it pent up, hardly ever mentioned I had a brother. Nora has quite a bit of Jason's features. After all, it's normal for a nephew or niece to resemble an uncle. Maybe that's why Leo believed it earlier. The car arrived. Jason opened the door for me and chuckled, sis, kinda curious how Leo will react when he finds out Nora's his daughter. I stayed silent. An image flashed by of Leo at the airport, facing the scattered bracelet pieces, gently comforting his daughter instead. The bracelet was scattered, it was broken. The baby's strong, the baby's sweet. I sighed, suppressing a heartache. Even if he learns the truth, so what? pushing us together, fighting tooth and nail every day? After getting out of the car, realized I left my phone. Went back to get it and overheard the driver on the phone. "Leo, boss, they've been delivered." "Leo?" I froze by the car. "Sis." Jason noticed I was standing still, came over. "What's wrong?" "Nothing, nothing." "Hospital." Jason held Nora. I took a deep breath and slowly pushed open the hospital room door. "Dad." "Don't call me Dad. I don't have a dad like this." My dad sat on the hospital bed, voice booming, so mad even his mouth slipped a bit. Gave me a glare. "I don't have a daughter like this." Then he messed up, the old man's face flushed red, pounding the bed. "Who is the child's father?" I steeled myself, stayed quiet. As the tension grew, Jason put Nora down, patting her. "Go ask Grandpa for candy." Nora waddled over with little hands outstretched. Dad glanced, face stern. Fought it, glanced again. Just saw her stumble over a slipper, nearly fell. "My darling." Dad jumped off the bed, scooped Nora up, voice unconsciously softened. "Slippers tripped the baby, Grandpa ain't wearing those anymore." Saying so, he stood barefoot, tossed the slippers into the trash. Seeing him calm down, I stepped up. "Dad." "Don't call me Dad, find out who her dad is first." I bit my lip, tentatively mentioned, "Leo." "Leo?" Dad's face darkened. "Leo's the father?" "No," I lowered my eyes, corrected, "I meant, I ran into Leo at the airport." Dad's expression eased. Even his tone softened. "If you really don't want to say, don't. Come back with Nora, Dad can care for you both." He held Nora, kissed her chubby cheek. "With Dad around, no one in a city dared to gossip about you two." My eyes stung a little. But Jason, the idiot, had to butt in, grinning. "Dad, what if she's the Smiths?" Dad kicked him, gave me a glare too. "I'll be half dead angry, then drag what's left of me to raise a granddaughter for the Smiths." There was a business banquet tonight, Jason and I attended on behalf of Dad. Ran into Leo again. 2 years later, at a distance, I finally dared to look at him properly. Leo matured quite a bit. After taking the helm of the Smiths for 2 years, he's now the CEO, eyes more composed, aura refined. It's just, there was a girl standing next to him. Vivian. Quiet and lovely, she doesn't even have to do anything. Just standing there, she's like the symbol of first love. I paused, awkwardly putting my arm through Jason's. As we approached the banquet hall, I happened to overhear someone mention Leo's name. Leo used to talk about what type he likes, and doesn't it seem obvious it's Vivian? Word is, both families are already discussing marriage. Didn't you know? Leo and Vivian were classmates briefly before she went abroad. Isn't it obvious? Vivian's probably the first love Leo's been keeping secret for years. I was so caught up listening that I stepped on my dress and stumbled. Jason caught me just in time. Looking up, I unexpectedly met Leo's gaze. He had one hand in his pocket, his eyes swept over my face and then dropped to where Jason held me. When I snapped back to reality, he had already turned to talk to Vivian. That eye contact felt almost imaginary. Whatever he said, it made Vivian laugh, dimples showing either side of her smile. I had to admit, they did look good together. Feeling a bit jealous, I turned away, found a quiet spot, and helped myself to a glass of red wine. My dad wants Jason and me to take over the company, but that's not my goal. I initially went abroad to avoid Leo and to further my studies. I'm a jewelry designer. I've won some international awards, but have never designed what I feel is my best work. Jason, as social as he is, can strike up conversations even though he just returned and no one here knows him. Sure enough. I took a sip, turned, and noticed Jason chatting happily with some girl. Hold up. I squinted, given my slight nearsightedness, and confirmed that girl laughing with him. It's Vivian. Great. Of all people, he's charming Leo's girl. Leo's known for being touchy about this stuff. I was about to get Jason when a familiar voice stopped me. In a flat, almost sarcastic tone, "Your husband seems to be enjoying himself with my friend." "Just my luck." I steeled myself, replied, "My husband is quite social." "That's obvious," he chuckled behind me. Leo took a seat across from me, and a faint scent of white musk hit me. It instantly pulled me back to 2 years ago, to that night. Dim lights, white musk mingling with a hint of alcohol, that intense whirl of desire. My face felt hot. "Too warm?" Leo asked, seeing right through me. "Why blushing?" "No." I licked my lips, trying not to dwell on those thoughts. Out of nervousness, I glanced over at Jason. He was still flirting. Couldn't hear what they were talking about, but Vivian seemed to be listening intently. They do pair well. I looked at Leo and asked, "You're not mad?" Leo chuckled, glanced their way. "He's your husband. If you're not worried, why should I be?" In my tension, I hadn't noticed my glass was empty until now. I'm not much of a drinker, but I could feel the buzz creeping up. In the silence that followed, Leo checked his phone. I, feeling braver thanks to the wine, stared back at Leo. Like I was trying to make up for lost time. "Leo." "Yeah?" I licked my lips and bluntly asked, "Are you and Vivian together?" Leo paused. Then he seriously looked at me. "No." I felt a flutter of happiness. But the next second, I noticed his fingers constantly brushing the bracelet on his wrist. The one that had broken at the airport but was restrung bead by bead. I softly asked, "That bracelet, is it important to you?" "Yeah," he replied, still fingering the beads, "because it's from someone important." I forced a stiff smile but didn't say anything. That little flicker of hope got snuffed out quick. "They're not together, yet." "Excuse me," I got up, "I need the restroom." 2 years passed. Things changed. He's become Leo, and I'm now a mom. No longer do we have that tension. We can sit and chat calmly now. I headed to the bathroom. Partway there, someone shouted, "Watch out." I looked up. Something knocked over a metal stand, and it toppled toward me. Too fast for me to react. I was suddenly pulled into a warm embrace. The scent of white musk enveloped me. The stand came crashing down. I heard a grunt from above me. "Leo." Leo held me tight, furrowing his brows like he was actually worried about me. "Are you okay?" he asked. I shook my head, noting the blood dripping from his head. "You're bleeding." Blood trickled down the back of his head. Leo wiped it, checking, "It's nothing." He stood, reaching out a hand to me, but for some reason, pulled it back. Then Jason rushed over. "Are you all right?" I nodded. Once Jason had me on my feet, I wanted to check on Leo, but our eyes met, and his gaze was icy. "Clumsy," Leo remarked, coolly, "can't you dodge?" And just like that, his earlier concern seemed imaginary. Leo wiped his hand, ease in his voice, "Don't get me wrong. Just didn't want any accidents here tonight." With that, Vivian approached. "Are you okay?" "Just a little cut," Leo said, his tone softened, "No big deal." She accompanied him to get first aid, and not once did Leo look at me again. After the party, Jason was out of the house for days. He wouldn't say where. Meanwhile, my dad was busy planning Nora's first birthday party. So, Nora's first birthday actually passed a month ago, but when Dad heard that we didn't celebrate it back when we were abroad, he felt bad for his granddaughter. He insisted on throwing a belated party for her. There was no convincing him otherwise, so I just let it go. But of course, on the day of the party, Jason had to stir up some drama. He invited Vivian. And to top it off, he even brought Leo. The second my dad saw Leo, his face dropped. But Leo was quick, he handed over a prepared gift. It was a longevity lock for Nora. Wished her safety and health with just those 2 sentences. That managed to smooth over my dad's ruffled feathers. All right, said Dad. Thanks for being thoughtful. Come on in. And just like that, Leo waltzed right into our house. Luckily, the day was all about Nora, so Dad didn't introduce Jason to the crowd. At least in front of Leo, Jason managed to stay under the radar. But Jason just didn't know when to stop. Midway through the party, he snuck off to chat with Vivian. The two seemed pretty chummy. Made me wonder if Jason's been with Vivian when he wasn't home lately. I glanced over and noticed Leo looking their way too, rubbing the bracelet on his wrist. The light was in my eyes, so I couldn't see his expression. But I bet he felt kinda bummed. Unlike Leo's coldness, Jason was charismatic, always knowing how to make girls laugh. Then Leo looked back at me and asked, "Do girls really like guys like that who know how to sweet-talk them?" Worried he felt down, I quickly shook my head, "Not always. Some like talkers, others prefer the quieter types. Like me. I like Leo's cool, detached vibe. Leo is reserved, speaks little, and his emotions stay level. He has this otherworldly sort of aloofness. Still, it was exactly that type that I pulled down from his pedestal, which only made that wild night more intense. What about you?" Leo's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. I looked up to catch him watching me, his expression unreadable. Before I could answer, he laughed it off, "Never mind. You're married to him, no use asking. There's always that can't-miss moment at a first birthday party, the choosing ceremony." My dad went all out, putting out an over-the-top assortment of items. There were checkbooks, real estate deeds, even traditional ink and paper. A photographer captured every moment. Everyone was glued to Nora, curious about what she'd pick. Under all those eyes, she crawled past stacks of house deeds, skipped over luxury car keys, and bypassed the calligraphy set. Just as Dad was thinking of having her do a retake, she made her way over to Leo. She navigated through every obstacle, then hugged Leo's leg, her baby voice piping up, "Dad, Daddy." The room went silent. Jason and I exchanged shocked glances, not quite knowing how to handle it. Looking back, Leo was staring at me too. He bent down, gently picked up Nora, and placed her back on the cushioned area for the ceremony. "Sweetie, which one do you like?" he asked softly. Our little girl reached for the bracelet on Leo's wrist. Feeling the tension, someone jokingly said, "Little princess knows what's good. Picking that, she's hoping for Buddha's blessings." Leo just smiled. He knelt down, adjusted the bracelet on Nora's tiny hand without a pause, "Then it's yours." Leo watched her, eyes soft. "May Buddha watch over you, Nora," he murmured. He then handed Nora to Jason, giving her back. After the party, I didn't see Leo for ages. I felt an emptiness I couldn't shake. Leo's bracelet, a gift from Vivian, was now on my wrist because Nora couldn't wear it. I felt guilty. It meant a lot to Leo, and I figured he only gave it to Nora because he didn't want to cause a scene. So, I decided to return it. I went to the Smiths. "Daisy?" Leo's mom greeted me with her usual warmth. "You're here to see Leo, right? He's upstairs sleeping." Unlike my dad, Leo's parents, though they butt heads with him, seemed to have a soft spot for me. "Go on up," his mom insisted. She then went off to tell their maid to prep some snacks. Reluctantly, I headed upstairs. I knocked. After a moment, a hoarse voice said, "Come in." I opened the door. Leo's room was as bare as always, just a bed and a nightstand. He was in bed, buried under the covers. As I got closer, I noticed how flushed he looked. I touched his forehead, it was burning. He had a fever. My cold hand must have startled him because he scowled, eyes cracking open. Our eyes met, and I felt oddly nervous. Then he muttered something under his breath, "Must be burning up. Now I'm seeing things." I blinked, puzzled. "What hallucination?" I asked, but got no answer. 1 second, 2. Suddenly, he reached over and pinched my cheek. Ouch! Leo slowly drew his hand back, sitting up. Something you need? His tone was aloof, distant. Feeling awkward, I held up his bracelet. I know this means a lot to you. Thought I'd return it. You don't have to, he replied, leaning back against the headboard, still indifferent. I gave it to Nora. With all the walls he'd put up, I almost backed down. But I couldn't help but say, you look feverish. You should take something for it. Leo raised an eyebrow. You're worried about me? Sort of, I said, tossing the bracelet onto his pillow. If you kick the bucket too soon, no one's gonna spar with me. Then my eyes landed on his nightstand, neat and tidy, holding just a single photo frame. And the person in the picture? It was me. Before I could even take a good look, Leo snatched the photo away. I bit back my racing heartbeat and asked mockingly, why do you have my photo on your nightstand? Leo, do you have a secret crush on me? Leo flipped the photo face down on the bed. Get real. Then why do you have my photo? I pressed, hoping for an answer deep down. Leo was silent for a while. Then he bent down and picked up a yellow charm that had fallen to the floor. To my shock, he stuck it onto the photo frame. It's to block your romantic luck, Leo muttered, his face so flushed I couldn't read his expression. I glared at the yellow charm, resisting the urge to shout. Quickly, Leo tore off the charm and shoved it, along with the frame, into the drawer. Daisy, he said. Yeah? If one day you find out your husband cheats on you, what would you do? That was an odd question. I instinctively wanted to strangle Leo in my mind. At a loss for words, I asked back, why do you ask all of a sudden? Just curious, he said, staring out the window, his expression unreadable. Did you meet him abroad? It took me a moment to realize he was asking about Jason. Yeah, I replied. It moved fast, he said, his tone low and hard to interpret. From the way his fingers tapped lightly on the bed, I could tell Leo was unhappy. 2 years abroad, and now with a 1-year-old kid. After a pause, Leo turned to me and asked, aren't you worried he's not right for you? Maybe it was Leo's strange attitude getting to me. I played along, saying, we're adults, aren't we? You find out compatibility by sleeping together. Haven't we slept together? The words slipped out, leaving us both stunned. Then Leo, as if resolving himself, quietly asked, Daisy, is Nora really my child? I remained silent, my heart a mess, unsure how to respond. Just then, a thud came from outside the door. My heart sank. It was over. Sure enough, the next second, Auntie burst in. Through the open doorway, the fruit tray could be seen knocked to the ground. Daisy, are you really with Leo? Auntie had heard us while bringing fruit and overheard we had a child. Leo and I spent an hour explaining ourselves until Auntie finally believed we weren't involved. To prove it, I showed her a picture of Nora. See? She looks nothing like Leo. They had no real connection. As Auntie fell silent, I saw an opportunity and almost bolted out of there. But really, I'd only just stepped out for a jewelry exhibit when Jason called. Come home, quick. Something happened. What's wrong? Jason, usually a smooth talker, sounded near tears. The Smiths came to claim their granddaughter, and Leo knows I'm your brother. My head swam as I rushed home. I imagined countless bad scenarios, tensions flaring, chaos reigning, all-out war, but none of it was right. Entering, I only heard baby talk. Sweetie, say Grandpa good girl. Don't say that old coot. Call me Grandpa, I'll give you candy. I walked in to see Andy holding Nora, showering her with kisses. When Daisy showed me the picture, I knew she was one of ours. She looks just like Leo did as a kid. The three people, with decades of rivalry now united by a shared bond, appeared harmonious. Glancing around, I locked eyes with Leo. He walked over, leaning in as he spoke so only I could hear, I know everything. Jason is your blood brother, and you're not married. I bit my lip, knowing there was no hiding anymore. But Leo's next words still shocked me. Jason also told me the kid's real father died overseas. Leo squeezed my hand and said, "Let them believe it. I can take responsibility." What kind of nonsense is this? Nearby, Jason winked at me triumphantly. After the Smiths left, I dragged Jason to the backyard. "What kind of stuff did you tell Leo?" Jason rubbed his ear, turned red by my grip. "I was testing him." "Testing him like that?" I huffed. "Hey," Jason sighed, "you ran off pregnant back then and now returned with a 1-year-old. I had to make sure he's genuine for you. But today, after hearing the father was dead and knowing you're raising her alone under all the gossip, he didn't hesitate. He said he'd take care of you and Nora." "He really believed that?" I asked incredulously. Jason shrugged. "I showed him a cremation urn in the basement. That's the cat's ashes." Jason nudged my arm. "Seriously, though, he's pretty manly. I'd say you could do worse for a brother-in-law." Then he added, whispering, "Leo looks good, comes from a good family, is responsible, healthy, and is Nora's biological dad. It seems like you wouldn't be losing out." I cut him off. "How do you know he's healthy? Please, once and you're pregnant. Get out." After shooing Jason away, I sat alone in the yard deep in thought. Actually, Jason wasn't wrong. Leo had it all. His only flaw was the person he cared for wasn't me. I think I might know why Leo abandoned Vivian and chose to be responsible for Nora and me. They were dating now. The speed was dizzying. So much that when Vivian followed Jason home and called me sis with a smile, I was still adjusting. But you know what they say, you can't escape what you fear. Vivian hadn't been seated long when Leo arrived, bringing heaps of toys and dresses for Nora. Maybe it was my own nerves, but I couldn't stop watching Leo, waiting for his reaction. Yet he remained surprisingly calm, even greeting Jason with a smile. Leo approached me, handing over the small dresses. "These are for Nora." I accepted them numbly. "And the ones behind are for you." "Huh?" I was dumbfounded, trying to wrap my head around it, and followed his gaze backward. I saw the driver trailing behind Leo, holding about 10 shopping bags. "They're all in your size and style." "Size?" I looked at him skeptically, but Leo just chuckled, "Measured the other night. You've lost a bit since 2 years ago. I got a smaller size." I shot him a glare. My face turned red, all the way to my ears. Just like that, my dad and the Smiths decided to bury the hatchet over someone not even a meter tall. Recently, the families have been discussing wedding plans. But then I got a call from a bar at night. Leo was wasted. When I got there, he was completely out of it. He's always been so controlled, even in business, he never overdoes it. This was the first time I'd seen him like this. When I tried to help him, he pushed me away without even opening his eyes. "Get lost. I'm getting married." I couldn't help but laugh and cry at the same time. In the end, I had the waiter help the driver get Leo into the car. I took him to a spare big apartment I have, helped him inside, and struggled to lay him on the bed. Just as I was about to get him some warm water, he grabbed my wrist suddenly. "Daisy." He opened his eyes and called my name with a slurred voice. "Yeah." I responded, but then he let go of my hand, chuckled bitterly, and said, "Forget it, dreaming again." The room lights were a bit harsh. He draped his arm over his eyes and mumbled, "Dreams so frequent, I even thought she wouldn't come back." I dimmed the lights a bit, didn't push his hand away, and just sat by the bed. I didn't know why Leo would say that, but a slight hunch made my heart race. They say people speak the truth when drunk. I leaned over the bed and asked him, "Leo, do you like Vivian?" Leo looked at me for a long time before sighing. This time the hallucination can talk. "Answer me first." Leo shook his head. Nope. Don't like her? Wasn't she your first love? Leo frowned. Didn't have a first love. Had a messy, dark moonlight. What's dark moonlight? I asked patiently. Okay, so who's this dark moonlight? He looked up at me. Daisy. This guy dismissively closed his eyes. This hallucination is flawed. Doesn't even know I like Daisy. I was stunned for a long time. His words replayed in my mind. I like Daisy. Leo likes me? I wanted to ask more but realized Leo was trembling slightly. Looking closer, the arm covering his eyes was slightly wet. Leo cried? I've never seen Leo cry, not even once. After what felt like ages, Leo spoke hoarsely. She was all alone abroad having a baby, lost her husband. My precious one went through so much. If I had realized sooner, I wouldn't have let her go. Honestly, that hit hard and was touching. But hearing the part about having a baby and losing a husband made me laugh out loud. Blame Jason and his big mouth. Leo soon fell asleep. I tried waking him up several times to ask more, but he was out cold. The ultimate proof was after finding out Leo liked me too. I watched him from the bedside and couldn't help it. I gave him a secret kiss. Once I had kissed him, I even petted him a bit. And then nothing else happened. Turns out the rumors are true. When a guy's really drunk, he's useless. When I woke up, Leo was sitting at the bedside, watching me. In that moment our eyes met. He looked so complicated. Sorry, he pressed his fingers to his temple. Drank way too much last night. He asked quietly, did I say anything I shouldn't have? Yeah. I sat up, tried to stay calm, looked him straight in the eyes. You said you like me. Leo was quiet for a couple of seconds, then gave a bitter smile. Yeah. He looked back at me, and sober, he was much more straightforward than I thought. Daisy, I like you. Who knew whose heartbeat was racing through the air, right in sync with the morning confession. Clear as a bell. He absent-mindedly fiddled with the bracelet on his wrist. I thought after seeing me wear this bracelet all the time, you'd figure it out. I was confused. Why would I know anything about a bracelet someone else gave you? Someone else? Leo was puzzled. Didn't you give me this? I stared at the bracelet, racking my brain, but it didn't ring a bell. Not until Leo mentioned when I might have given it that I began to suspect maybe I really did give it to him. But I had no clue. Back in high school, Leo and I made a bet whoever lost would shave their head, and I barely won. It happened to be around Leo's birthday, so I asked my nanny to get him a gift. My only request was, it should highlight his bald self. And it was just by chance that I was busy with a concert. The gift my nanny prepared, I didn't even bother to open it, just handed it to Leo myself. Thinking back, maybe that was when the bracelet found its way to Leo, and stayed there ever since. We both stared at the bracelet, lost in thought. After a while, Leo let out a laugh. So this bracelet I've treasured for years was actually picked out by your nanny. Face burning, I retorted. She chose, but technically I gave it. Felt a bit guilty, so I swiftly changed the topic. But why does your public dating profile match Vivian's to AT? Everyone assumes you like her. Leo lit a cigarette, sighed. Back then, it was all about pride. Our families at each other's throats. I couldn't admit I liked you. When people asked, I picked everything opposite you to describe. Scared folks would catch on. Thinking it over, it was true. His ideal type was pretty much my opposite. He'd say he liked white dresses, dark hair, calm and sweet. While I was known for being wild in school, skirts shorter than shorts, changing hair colors like every other month. The school never managed to control me anyway. Leo flicked the ash. Whenever I mentioned it, I was paranoid they'd see through me. Didn't have time to really notice anyone else. The room fell quiet again. It seemed like all the years of misunderstandings were finally clearing up. Breaking the silence was Leo's low, cautious question. Last night, I didn't, do anything? You didn't. I shrugged. You couldn't. Leo? He moved to pull the covers. Wanna bet? I quickly pushed the covers back down. Get dressed. Need to go back and check on Nora. All right. Mentioning Nora, Leo immediately hopped out of bed. Nora's getting a vaccine these days. Plus, she might have a cavity in her baby teeth. She's seeing a dentist today. When he talked about Nora non-stop, it suddenly made me think about how I'd been fixated on him liking Vivian. I hadn't even told him. Nora is his child. In the car, I teased him by saying, "Why are you so concerned if she's not your kid?" As the light turned red, Leo glanced at me and said, "Who said she's not mine?" On her first birthday, Nora made her choice. He reached over from the driver's seat and held my hand. "No need to test me," I said. I'd take responsibility, and I mean it. My house had never been so lively. My dad wouldn't let Nora stay at the Smiths, but Leo's family wasn't upset, they just moved in. Everyone surrounded Nora, entertaining her. We even got back the family of dogs I had taken abroad 2 years ago. Leo's mom held Nora, getting more and more fond of her. She picked the best features from her parents, she said, eyes like Daisy, nose like Leo. Leo stood by, looking at Nora with a tender gaze. My heart softened. I held his hand and whispered with a smile, "I think her nose really looks like Leo's too." While a group entertained Nora, I pulled Leo upstairs. The room's curtains were heavy, making it quite dark inside. Leo lifted me, pressed me against the door, yet still teased, "In such a hurry?" Wrapping my arms around his neck, I said, "Leo, when I gave birth to Nora, it was over a month past the due date. It hurts so much." I was alone and terrified in that operating room. I kept wishing you were there. I buried my face in his shoulder, feeling him go still and tense. "Leo, Nora is your child. You believed Jason's lies. I've always been loyal to you." Leo was silent for a bit. Then he pulled me into a tight embrace, apologizing, his voice full of regret. "Sorry, I wasn't there when you needed me." Even though I had left on my own, he still apologized with such heartache. But his body wasn't quite sorry, showing little courtesy. I nudged him, "Let go, you're digging into me." "Won't let go," Leo replied, lowering his head to kiss me. Mocking my morning tone, he said, "I can't do it." I couldn't help but laugh. "I'd told you before, this guy holds a grudge," remembering everything I said that morning. "Nora's downstairs," I reminded him. "It's fine," he assured, "there's her grandparents, 2 nannies, and 9 dogs down there." Leo's hand slipped under my clothes with a familiar touch that easily stirred my desires. He held me tight, the door creaking with each bump. The room was dim, and Leo pushed my sweaty hair behind my ear, sighing, "I've searched for you countless times these 2 years, but the old man hid your whereabouts well." He pinched my waist lightly, making me squirm. By the way, I stopped Leo's wandering hand to ask, "Why were there rumors Vivian and your families were arranging a marriage?" Leo's lips twitched, explaining, "It wasn't for us, it was for the dogs." "After you took our dogs," he started. I cut him off, "The dogs insisted on going with me." "All right," Leo chuckled, "the dogs insisted on going with you. I got a new one, a male this time." It fell for Vivian's dog and ran off to her place, refusing to return. So, we arranged for it to live there as a son-in-law. "That's it?" I asked. "That's it." Leo rubbed his temples. "You know how crazy rumors can get." "True. Back in school, I used to run every morning, and sometimes people took pictures of me passing Leo's place. Rumors spread that I'd crawled out of Leo's bed for my morning run. Ridiculous." I asked him, "When did you start liking me?" Leo thought for a moment, then said, "Since school." He put his hands on my waist, squeezing gently. "If we're talking about falling in love, that's 2 years ago." The way he emphasized love made me blush. I tried to use checking on our daughter as an excuse to escape his embrace. He pulled me back, whispering, "Be good, soon." I believed him. But as it turned out, I shouldn't have. 2 hours later, with my legs weak, I wobbled downstairs, calling him a liar.